Good day and welcome to the Robust Ramblings podcast. Today I've got the privilege of speaking to Caitlin, who's a good friend of mine, on the topic of non-profit organizations and mercy ministries and the challenges and the pitfalls that she's been going through working with prostitutes and gangsters on the streets and trying to give them a sustainable solution to help them and give them a better life. We'll be discussing some of the systems required and processes that will make your non-profit organization sustainable in order to stand the test of both the challenges you'll be facing in this industry as well as the test of time. I hope you enjoy it. Sweet. So Caitlin, welcome. Thank you for taking some time to being on the Robust Ramblings podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is such a pleasure.
Yeah, today we're going to have a rambling here with Caitlin. So Caitlin is actually originally from Klerksdorp. So it's good to have you, Caitlin. I've been trying to do the math this morning. I think we've known each other now for 7 or 8 years.
Crazy.
Yeah, and it's actually the friendship that both of us were a part of back then was a major part of getting my own life on track. So I mean, it's been great to see what God has been doing in our lives, and also especially looking at what God has been doing in yours. You've got an amazing story to share, and I'm thankful that you're willing to share it with everyone listening today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Caitlin, if you wouldn't mind starting and just sharing a bit about, your upbringing, Klerksdorp, the whole idea, you came to study here in Potch, where we're based now. I mean, you're based here as well. Maybe just give some background and then let's see where the story takes us.
Perfect. Yes, so I grew up in Klerksdorp. I have a wonderful family. We're really tightly knit, and I learned a lot from my parents when it comes to compassion and really caring for the needs of those who are around you. And initially when I was in high school, I wasn't in relationship with the Lord, but I was trying to be a good Christian. So in my grade 12 year, when I was wondering about what I wanted to study, my whole motives was I want to become rich so that I can go and help the needs of those who can't help themselves. But it was really more focused on what is how can I make money and my efforts. So with that, I loved maths, I love chemistry. So I was like, well, the most obvious choice is to become a chemical engineer. So when I went to the Northwest University to go and study chemical engineering, I fully came to faith. Like the Lord made me, I gave my life to Him. I learned that there's actually relationship available with Him. And through that, when I was encountered by Him, I asked the question, God, is this what you want me to do? Like, should I continue studying this, or should I just completely leave it and go into the mission field? And I felt God say that He is raising up another kind of missionary that's skilled and equipped in meeting the needs of His people. So I continued studying chemical engineering, but I didn't quite know how it would look like after that. So when I finished studying it, the Lord led me to do my master's in water purification in chemical engineering. And after that, that's when He invited me to step into the mission field, to join YWAM, specifically within YWAM Fire and Fragrance South Africa, that's located here in Potchefstroom. And the whole vision that I felt from God was, okay, water purification in Africa, meeting the needs of those who can't help themselves. And it completely shifted from where I was like, how can I make money and meet the needs, to God, how can I follow you to meet your people and help them the way you want us to help them? Anyway, so I, after the discipleship training school that I did this school called Revival and Reformation, with the whole idea of how can we meet physical needs as well as bringing the gospel to people that actually transforms lives. And while I was doing this school, God reminded me of a word that He had spoken, I think it was 3 years prior to that, where He kind of brought up women in prostitution. And it was so hard for me because at least in my culture, or where I grew up, we completely disconnected ourselves from women like that, because it's so dirty and
Yeah.
messy.
I mean, even the thinking of the way we grew up, the parts of town where that typically takes place, when we refrain from going there at night
Yes.
altogether.
Yes, because it's dangerous and it's bad, and it's like you, especially as a Christian, you do not go there,
Yeah,
which is such a wrong thing.
yes. I
Because
mean,
we have to go there.
exactly. I mean, if you look at the first person that Jesus called, it was Mary,
Amen.
and she was a prostitute, right? So,
Amen.
one of the first.
One of the first. God is so kind. So it was funny because my heart was very disconnected, but I was so encountered by the love of God for me that I was like, God, please come and change my heart. Please come and soften it, because I want to follow you and I want to obey you and I want to love you with my obedience, because that's what the Bible says, how we show our love to him. And during the 3 years, he completely came and touched my heart and opened it up for vulnerable women. But then he got quiet with regards to that, and the focus was the studies. Okay, finishing that. So when I was doing the Revival and Reformation School, the Lord brought it up again, and I asked him, God, is there anything you want me to do right now with this? Because we had to form part of a ministry while doing this school, and it was so clear that this is something that he was inviting me into to step in right away. So at that time, I had no idea what I was doing. I had spoken to one prostitute before that, and
Was that for like also a ministry type?
yes, it was with the church. It was with Kruispunt.
Okay.
One night we went out
Wow.
to evangelize,
Yes.
and it was so hard because I could see that night when we were speaking to these women, they didn't want anything to do with us. They didn't want to speak with us. They didn't want to give us any of their time because we were wasting their time that they could make money. So I just remember when, also the first time that I went out to the streets, it was with our friends Arnie, Leandri. We stopped there and the women were lined up. And within like 5 minutes, all the women disappeared but the one that we were going to take a Bible to.
Sure.
And then we saw our car being surrounded by men and we just had to drive away. So I was driving away there weeping, saying, God, how on earth are you calling me into something so dangerous?
So, I mean, the reason why you drive away is you felt in danger.
Yes.
Okay.
So we assume it was the women's pimp that got men to come and scare us off.
Okay.
So that was what was happening.
So, sorry, if I can just interrupt you. So, if I think of the story that you've been sharing now, so there was something intrinsic that happened inside of your own life, art, you felt God speak to you. And because of that, your natural response was to try and help those people.
Yes.
Right? So God did something in your life. You want to live a life with purpose, something that's going to bring glory to Him, in our Christian context. And this was the outflow that you felt Him speak to you about.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So that was the first time. Sorry, let me leave you to continue.
Perfect. Yeah, so that was the first time. So fast forward, 3 years later, 4 years later, doing this school, God is bringing that up again. And then I was faced with, I have no idea what I'm doing, but God spoke and I love Him and I want to be obedient. And we just prayed, and it was so sweet because God gave really clear strategy on how we can go out and meet these women. One of them was that prayer and worship would be the foundation of the ministry, and the second one was that being consistent and building relationship is what will bring the breakthrough. So we started going to the street corner. They didn't want anything to do with us, and we would just come. We're like, "Hi, my name is Caitlin. What's your name? Would you like coffee? Have you heard about Jesus?"
Even I would be scared if people corner me on the side of the street like that.
Yes. So it was just, honestly, the start was very funny, but we saw God move in a wild way, where I think it was the third time that we went out, the women, there was still not a lot of trust that was built, but they left the street corner that they were standing on and they came and stood with us to worship. So what they were saying is, in that time, they're willing to not make money and just worship with us, which was honestly a testimony of the move of God and not our great efforts, because it literally was impossible that out of friendship, because it was 3 times that we had seen them, that they would trust us. Anyway, so the ministry continued where we just went out every single week to the street corners. We were building relationship with the women. And I think what was so sweet is these women became our friends. So I said yes to a call that God placed in front of me. But He's so kind with how He comes and knits our hearts together in love. So basically what happened is one night I was standing there and I was looking at these women and I was saying to God, like, Lord, my friends are still on the street. Something needs to change. And I'm not seeing anyone taking responsibility for them. And that's kind of where, like, the outcry came of, like, what are we going to do? Who's going to take responsibility? But I also was so aware that we needed God's strategy, because a lot of the women are from foreign countries, so they can't work in South Africa legally. And so there's just a lot of like red tape on how that can look like. And by God's leadership, we started Woven, which is...
So that's the name of your company?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's a non-profit company. It's part of Fire and Fragrance South Africa, and it's to help vulnerable women get out of the situations that they're in. So initially how we started, I know with the business, having startup capital is very important. We didn't have any startup capital.
I think that's the place where most people find themselves in wanting to start anything.
Yes. They're like, we need the money. How do we do that?
Yes.
And what was so incredible about our community is I shared with them the vision that we have with helping vulnerable women. And they were all like, we want to buy in. We want to help you. So people just sewed in money. And we then went and bought our first sewing machine and some other materials. And we started with 2 women. And we invited them during the day to come to the base, and we taught them skills. One of them is actually a skilled seamstress. So I pulled her in to teach the others, and it was just wild seeing how God was moving in their hearts, as well as seeing how a practical solution was being built. And where God was leading us towards was, how can we build something that still honors the law while going against a very big injustice that's in our nation.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this in the past, wanting to help people. In our context, it was specifically Zimbabwean guys in the church with us that wanted to have jobs. They fled from Zimbabwe because of obviously a lot of stuff going on there, and they don't have the means to provide for their family. So in this case, a lot of the guys live here. Families are still in Zimbabwe, and they can't technically legally work under a private company because they can't be fully employed. They don't have the right documentation. But obviously these people have to make a living of some sorts, right? So we've seen the same thing and trying to find ways how we can help them. And it's always a challenging balance to want to do that legally, because obviously we need to be doing things the right way. But it's difficult because the law doesn't always provide space to help vulnerable people in these circumstances. It sometimes actually limits you, and to have to make a decision on, are you going to help the person and you're going to pay them for work that they've done, or are you not going to help them at all, and then they sit without food and their family needs something to live from. So it's a very difficult tension.
Very, very, especially when you see it feed in to unlawful things. So now you see, because there's no space that our law is helping the sojourner, as the Bible speaks about, we see more gangs being formed. We see more prostitutes on the street.
Yes, because they need an income. So the time that I've spent ministering to prostitutes in the past, the question was like, why are you doing this? obviously you know it's wrong. You feel like you don't want to do this anymore. And the answer was just, what else should I do? Like, what is the alternative? And I love that which you just shared about your outcry moment. Like, these are your friends now. Like, it's good to view it in that way, because then you're actually compelled to do something rather than distance yourself from it.
Yes, that's so true. It's funny how the Lord works, because I've been thinking lately about where it's in Corinthians where it speaks about love, and God asks of us to really love. Otherwise, any work or effort that we do is just a noise in His ears. And it was just sweet for me to see in stepping out and doing the work, God was the one that like poured in the love, and he connected the hearts, and he's so strategic in that. I felt like and yes, it's so true what you're saying, because there was one woman that I met on the street, and her words marked me. She, with tears in her eyes, said to me, "Caitlin, I know what I'm doing is wrong, and I know that Jesus can come back tomorrow. And if He comes, what He will find is a prostitute, but I have no other way to feed my family." And even with, I've sat with some of the gangsters, and the one guy said, not a lot of the men who are in gangs want to do that, but they have no other way to feed their family. So they're left with the question of what else can we do but to do things that are wrong in order to make sure that our family doesn't starve. So that's the question that I'm sitting with, is how can we help these people and create something that's a sustainable solution?
Yeah, and not just give donations or whatever.
Yes, not just something where we equip them and we leave them with a tool or a skill in the hand.
Yeah, that's very good. You know, one of the reasons why we started this podcast is because we sincerely believe that entrepreneurship in some form or another is going to help lead to a space where we can empower people in this country to come out of this bad cycle of poverty. Because in order to give someone a sustainable solution, there needs to be income generated. And that's either going to be through services or products. And in your case, you guys opted for the product route, equipping people to create products so that they can continue with or without you, if that needs to be the case. So you mentioned now you got 2 people, you started training them. What happened after that?
Yes, so we started training them, and then God added to the numbers. We ended up with 5 women, and well, actually 6. One of them had to go back to her nation, and she's completely off the streets. She's with her family.
Wow.
And so for the whole of last year, we sat with 5 women, teaching them skills. And so we taught them how to make a scrunchie, which is like a hair tie. And then as woven, we would buy the products that they make from them. So how we set it up is that they would be independent product producers.
So each one basically being their own business.
Yes.
But doesn't have to be registered. They're independent.
Yes.
Okay, like basically like a sole proprietor, eenmanszaak, Afrikaans. Yes. Okay,
yes.
Got it.
And we were looking at how you would see street vendors, and because it's such a small amount of money that they make, it didn't look like the law was persecuting them or going after them.
Tax exempt, basically. Yes. So from a tax perspective, that's fine. And then you leave the legalities of their employment up to their own sole proprietor business. You don't get involved with that. So that makes sense.
That's where we were at. So Woven would then buy the products, and then we would sell it under our company name. And it was incredible, because the first time that I showed them how Woven is selling the products, so we had the scrunchie, we put this beautiful gold foiled label on it saying Woven. The one woman looked at it and she said, God must be real, because there's no way that my hands can make something that beautiful. So in the process where we were teaching them skills, teaching them how they can like have a way to get an income, God was meeting them and showing them that you actually have great value and you were created for more than just being on the streets. So there was such a like a twofolded purpose that was happening, which was the goal. We wanted to disciple the women. I believe getting people off the street is easy. Getting their lives changed, that's the work of God that we need to see. And that's what we want to see. We want to see people being encountered by his love, being discipled, and have their lives fully transformed, rather than having them just get a job and as soon as they leave the job, they go back to prostitution.
Old ways,
Or even getting a job and staying in their old ways. Because that's the story of one of the women that we were working with. She got a job. It was an amazing testimony. But her life didn't transform because she didn't give her life to Jesus fully. So we would still find her in the clubs and in the pubs and with men. So our whole vision is, how can we help women with their physical need, but also see their lives fully transformed by the gospel?
Yeah, and actually, I think it's a good approach. I mean, so this is a very big purpose-driven entity. And what we've seen a lot in South Africa is people trying to help with the physical needs without changing people's lives, undergoing actual change. And I mean, that's a cycle that we have not as a country gotten out of yet, because we keep giving without the transformation taking place. So it's not sustainable. And then if you want to do transformation without looking after the physical need, then you don't get people to come to the space physically, or time-wise, to enable themselves to be transformed. So, I mean, thinking of the 5 ladies that you were working with, so did they fully stop with the prostitution work that they did, and they came over to Woven full-time to make the scrunchies?
Yes, so in the start, how it worked was, because I have seen how just giving aid cuts off people's hands, and they love the dependency, basically, what it creates. And we wanted to create a space where the women had to say yes, and it would be hard. So we said to them, if you want to be part of Woven, you would have to fully step out of prostitution, and you would have to trust God with your finances. So all of the women, they fully stepped out of prostitution, and it didn't happen overnight. It was a process of a few weeks, discipling them in that, teaching them how to trust God. So it wasn't an easy transition for them, which is understandable, because the streets for them is their financial security.
Yeah, it's basically saying to someone, hey, you're going to leave your job now. I mean, from our perspective, it seems easy because we see the one thing is immoral, and your normal job might not be blatantly immoral, obviously. So if you had to equate it, it's basically, hey, would you leave your job to trust the Lord to provide for you, and then you guys giving them a way out once they do that?
Yes, which is so hard. It's we were expecting something big from them without them fully having really seen God move in that area. But it was sweet seeing how kind God was with them, seeing the journey with them, with how they were being encountered by the Lord. So they fully stepped out of prostitution, fully came under Woven, basically, or came to our facility, did the work, we bought the products, and then every single day we would disciple them. And then at the end of it, because we don't want to, well, at least what I felt from God for that season specific, is that we shouldn't build a big warehouse, because that's not even what Woven is we're not providing jobs for them.
Yeah.
But that it should be time specific, and that we should then have a way to send the women out. So it's like a program that they come in and then they able to go out.
Okay, so you train them for X number of days or weeks, and then after that they're an independent contractor for Woven, and then you still walk some kind of emotional ride with them.
Yes, it depends on where they're at. So currently all 5 women are back in the towns that they're living. Some of them are back in the countries that they live. So our role is we're still their friends, so we still have contact with them, hearing how they're doing, but we encourage them to go and form part of the local church where they're in, and then be part there. And I think the whole like flag that I saw is we need to be careful of not discipling them onto us.
It's
At this,
not to become dependent, yeah.
yes,
Yeah, but that's actually empowering people, because if you make them dependent on yourself, then you're only going to have that much capacity
yes,
for people depending on you. Where if you empower them, then you can start a movement
exactly.
and them empowering other people. That's very good. So, I mean, okay, one thing I've been thinking of, right? One of the things that my mentors in the past have told me was the one thing that they wished they'd learned earlier in their lives was how to have difficult conversations with people. Now, I can imagine having, firstly, the conversation with prostitutes without, in our mind, this might not be the right word, but demonizing people, looking at them as the enemy, or people in workspaces find themselves in the same way. I'm angry at my boss. I don't want to go and speak to them now. How do you overcome that barrier to then speak to someone, to handle a difficult conversation? Because even in the prostitute, I mean, you mentioned a pimp earlier. Were there conversations with pimps that you had to have to be able to help get the prostitutes out, because they are the pimp's livelihood as well, right? So maybe you can share a bit on that.
Yes. This is a very good question, and it's something that I'm honestly still learning a lot about. But I think the major thing that I would say, and I really do believe that this is not a fluffy answer, but it's the love of Jesus. Because there were moments where I would sit in front of a woman who went back to the street for a night. And I would have to sit in front of her saying, my friend, if you choose that, you cannot be here. Like, there's a choice that you need to make. And it's not easy, because even like in my heart, there has been a lot of disappointment that we have seen with some of these women, where they say things or promise things, or they just completely fall back in their old patterns. And it's not easy. And I at least felt the frustration of like, I do not want to work with this person. Like, you can go and choose your own life. I don't care. Or that's that comes up. And then every time I have to be like, Lord, come and show me your love. Because he was merciful towards me. I was such a sinner, and honestly, so hard to work with before I gave my life to him. But he kept on pursuing me. And it was because of his love. So that's something that, working with these women, and even with the men that we're working on the streets, the gangsters and the pimps that we've encountered, the big thing that I know I constantly have to lean in is God's love. And love expects the best. And love endures all things, bears all things, hope for all things, believe all things. And that's no easy thing. And that's why, even in a normal work environment where you're not working with prostitutes or pimps or gangsters, when you have a colleague that you feel has done something unjust towards you, for you to go and say, Lord, would you come and pour your love in my heart for this person? Would you come and give me your eyes for this person and help me to fight for this person? Because it's easy to just push someone away and brush them off. I do not believe that that's the way of God, or how he has called us to walk. And then also to release. If you're working with someone and what they're choosing is either to just go against you the whole time, or at least in our context, where they're like, I choose the street. We have one woman who said to me, she's like, I am not going to do a hard work. I will rather be on the street than do a job that's physically taxing. And then to be like, well, then I release you.
Yeah.
I can't help you, but I still love you, and I'm still fighting for your life. Like, I'm still interceding for that woman, for God to come and touch her, encounter her. But you have permission to just release also. But it shouldn't be out of a place of frustration or hatred or offense. Continuously leaning into the love of Jesus.
Yeah, so practically what I hear you saying is love is also speaking the truth, obviously in love. So in your context, sharing the reality of the effects of the woman's actions with them. If you continue with this behavior, that means we can't help you. Then you are deciding that you don't want to go on with this because it's the one or the other. And I think those firm boundaries are helpful. Otherwise, it never helps people with transformation. You know, I love what you referred, you alluded to it earlier about it's going to cost you something and you having to understand the cost of making those decisions. So, I mean, how did the conversations with the pimps go? I want to hear how this worked. So,
Yes.
so maybe just for context, people who don't know what a pimp is, maybe you can just explain that because it might be lingo.
So, with sexual exploitation, one form of it is when you have a person managing the prostitutes, whether it's women as prostitutes or men as prostitutes. The pimp would be the one that's kind of their manager, and they would work for him or her. What we're seeing a lot on the streets is that it's mostly men, and then also the way that they would manage it is the woman would be their girlfriend, and so they play a lot of like on relational equity with the women, so playing on their feelings, manipulation.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so the pimps, that has been very interesting because all the encounters that I've had with pimps were them coming to us saying, "What are you doing here on the street?" And which, praise God, every time that would happen, I would just feel the confidence of the Lord, and I would tell them, "Well, we are worshiping Jesus and sharing about Jesus. What are you doing here?" And every time that has happened, they kind of like would sit back and they wouldn't attack us, if that makes sense. And then the one pimp that we were speaking to, he was like, "What are you doing here?" And I just felt to ask him, like, do you follow Jesus and have you heard his voice? And he said no. And then me and my one friend, we led him to hear God's voice. And then at the end, with tears in his eyes, I asked him, like, what do you feel is God saying? And he said, "I feel God says I'm accepted." So it has looked very different. With some of them, we have just been very firm saying this is what we're doing because we can see they want to kind of like scare us off. Yeah. But in other moments, it has been where God has led us to show compassion and pour into them. With each one, we have asked, "Do you know Jesus? Would you like to know?" Most of them just walk away then. But yeah, that's kind of... And then also with the gangsters, because we're fully aware that most of the gangsters that we meet and that we're building relationship with are men that are exploiting the women that we're trying to reach. And then even just in that, when you speak to a person face to face and you have Holy Spirit dwelling in you, like you feel God's love for this person. Like you do not see an oppressor, but you see someone who God desires and who he's after. And then it's easy to just love and have the hard conversations, but out of love.
Yeah, I'm inspired by the fact that the purpose-drivenness of what you have a calling for pushes you beyond boundaries that normal people would be fearful of. So putting yourself in a situation where you're like, I don't know, 1.6, 1.5 meters tall. I mean, you're skinny. It's not like you're this massive CrossFit lady that's going to smack these guys. So, I mean, it's not a form of intimidation. It's not that you're going to intimidate them. I mean, exactly, you're the type of person that they would easily prey on if you would just judge from a physical perspective. No offense.
No, it's true.
I just want to explain this to people listening to this, that, I mean, if you look at Caitlin, you won't think this is the lady that's going to go and chat with the gangs. But the fact that you're purpose-driven enables you to persevere through those moments. So thinking of the 5 ladies that you guys have trained and equipped. Now, I've heard of many cases where people have similar dreams to want to equip. I mean, there's programs like Work for a Living. There's one called Paradigm Shift. This is another one similar, with the idea of equipping people to be independent, to help social upliftment, but also in your case, there's a bigger picture of getting those women out of the circumstances that they're in. What are the typical things that you saw were really helpful in your process of trying to equip them and help them to get out of their circumstances? We're going to get in a moment to, what were the pitfalls that you guys made mistakes on as well, because I think this is a helpful conversation for people who have a similar vision. So what advice can you give to people to help enable others, make them the independent contractor or whatever the case may be?
Well, I think the first thing that really helped me was being surrounded by a community that really championed what I felt from God and what I had on my heart, who supported me through like decisions that I had to make, or even just big leaps that I took. And I also think the permission that was given of, hey, it's okay if this fails. Because before this sewing, I was teaching one of the women how to do nails and it completely failed.
Really?
Completely. But it was, I feel like the permission of like, just go for it. And if it fails, then let's see what the next thing is. And then we go for that, which is the whole thing when you pioneer something new, is you need to be okay with failing.
Yeah, that's very, very good. I'm thinking even just of anything entrepreneurial, business-wise as well. Statistically speaking, you will fail unless you're one of the lucky few. I mean, I think the stats are like 1 out of 10 businesses succeed or whatever. So giving yourself the mandate that you're allowed to fail, and then giving everything to try and make it succeed. That's a very helpful comment.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, continue.
No, that's so good. And you have to, especially if you're a perfectionist, you just need to get over it and just fail forward, basically. What also helped was setting clear boundaries with, especially if you have a heart to meet a need or to do some form of mercy ministry. It's very important for you to hear from God what it is that you need to do, and then to set boundaries in place. Because sometimes what happens is, like, the need is so big and there's always another person to reach. There's always another person to help. Or even with the people that you're working with, like, their needs might grow. And I think it's just so important to put in boundaries and say, this is what my responsibility is. My responsibility is to do this thing. And beyond that, I need to trust God.
What would an example be? Like, I'm going to help her get off the street and then my work is done. Or is it, I'm going to train her? And so what would a practical example be of that?
Yes. So, well, one example is when we had the 5 women, there were more women who wanted to join. But then I had to look at our capacity that we had. Well, honestly, majority of the whole year that we were working with them, it was solely me helping. And then I had someone who came and served, and only at the end of the year, we had 2 staff members join. And I had to be realistic with capacity and even just with the equipment that we had. And if I had to bring in more women, then I would have basically hurt the women that we were already working with. So I had to kind of like draw the line of, okay, it's 5 women that we're helping right now. The other who want to join, they're so welcome to come to our Bible study. They're so welcome. Like, we're willing to help them with CVs if that's what they want. But with the sewing, I had to draw the line of how many women we could take in, and that was hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That
I've never
was
even
very
thought
hard.
of the concept of healthy boundaries here. Because I mean, there's, I don't know, how many people would you say in Potch alone are caught up in prostitution?
Oh my goodness, so many. It's
Thousands.
It's hard to, I don't actually know what the number is, because even just in the area where we're ministering, there's hundreds of women. But then also there's another level of prostitution. So, but yeah, a lot.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, yeah, that makes sense, because, I mean, the entire thing would fall flat on its face if 100 women needed to be helped immediately. obviously there's the desire to help them,
Yes.
but there's your physical, financial, whatever limitations. So that makes sense. I think that's good advice, is deciding what are you going to take on and then committing to that. And I can imagine it's really difficult to say no to the other ones who actually want to get out of that life. If you
Very
don't have help.
hard.
Yeah.
Very hard.
So, okay.
And also then when you're faced with that, to just turn to God and say, Lord, I am not the savior, you are. And I trust you. I trust these women with their life. I trust you with their lives, with these women's lives. And also another thing that we were seeing is people want an easy way out, but not a lot of them are willing to work hard or make the hard decisions. So we even had boundaries in there. So we said to the women, with the 5 so we had the 2 that we started with, which joined our Bible study every single week for a few months. And then with the other 3, we said, if you want to come and join this program, you need to come to our Bible study at least for 6 weeks.
Okay.
So they need to show a form of commitment, because also what we've seen is, like the woman with the nails, she committed to doing the nails. We helped her. We went beyond to help her. And then one day she just ghosted us because it was hard work. We didn't hear from her, didn't see her on the streets. She just completely stepped out. And then when she heard about the sewing, she showed up and she said, okay, I'm willing to learn about sewing now. Like, this sounds fun.
Yeah.
And I had to say, my friend, I'm sorry, but we were committed to you, but you weren't committed to us, and you need to show a level of commitment. So there was another boundary line that honestly helped, because the women who came were very committed.
That's good. And sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment. So we've seen the same thing with work for a living. Have you been exposed to work for a living?
It's incredible.
Yeah. So
incredible.
So we've seen that is they also ask a fee. The commitment for them is a fee, and obviously you have to be on time, etc., etc. But the fee is there, so people can be brought in to complete it. Otherwise, they don't go through the whole process, which means they don't get as equipped or have the fruit in their life afterwards that they should have had, which meant you did not necessarily waste your time on them, but you wasted the opportunity of investing it into someone that would have done something with it.
Yes. And that's a hard decision to make, but it's a healthy boundary to draw. It's very healthy. I think what else really helped with building this was having input from people who actually have worked with this line of work. So I would encourage anyone, whether it's a mercy ministry that you're doing or just a business that you're building or starting up, to be humble enough to go and ask for help.
That's very good advice.
Because
that's the one thing that we have had in all of our conversations with people, is having people around you that know more than you, that can help you make decisions.
Exactly. And we shouldn't feel weird about it when we don't know what we're doing. I had to be really real with myself, saying I have no idea what I'm doing. God is going to lead me, but I also need to be humble to press into people around me, to ask questions.
That's good. I mean, you're referring to this earlier about building an aeroplane while you're flying it. Our CEO, Alec, says the same thing. We were standing on a cliff one day. We went for a hike near a quarry that close to where he lives at. And he stands on the side of the cliff after we finished the hike, and he's like, the definition of entrepreneurship is building an aeroplane while flying. And he jumped off the cliff into the water, and we all had a big laugh. But I realized that's true. At the end of the day, nobody really knows everything, especially as an entrepreneur. You start by figuring it out as you're going along, and that's okay.
Yes.
I think the permission to fail you referred to earlier was I think it's a beautiful example, because then you have the permission to fail, which means you'll learn every single time that you fail. You've learned a whole lot. So what pitfalls did you guys experience? I mean, what mistakes did you make that were not helpful to building this and would help other people who want to build similar things to not that have the same pitfalls?
I think the first big thing is I did this alone. I see so much value in team, in having people around you doing it with you. It's way better to do this with people than to have to try and figure it out by yourself. And yeah, so to firstly just start and invite people in. I think for me the hardest thing was building it by myself at the start and just feeling my physical limitations and seeing how it was actually also impacting the progress of the ministry and the business. So I would say if you're starting something, if it's a ministry, get people to come around you and join in, build a team, and then go out and meet the needs. Do not be so pushed by the need that you see that you just jump in, like have people join in. Unless God says just jump in. I really believe I was obedient, but if there's one piece of advice I can give is have team. Another pitfall that we saw was that and I spoke about this earlier, but we were discipling the women onto us, that they were looking at us as the solution. And then we had this whole phase where we had to really address it and tell them, no, it's Jesus. Like we were speaking about Jesus all the time, but they would say, Caitlin helped us off the street, and Carla or Kelsey, like they, really honoring us, but to a point where we were like, wait, no, you need to know that it's Jesus. Like you don't need us, you need Jesus. So not when you're working with the vulnerable or those in need, do not disciple them onto you, because then you're just going to sit with people who are dependent on you.
No, so there's something interesting here. I think it's an underlying. I advocate for this in the business context as well. Is building away from yourself, because then you build longevity and sustainability in. So I mean, in your case, if they were completely looking to you, and God forbid a bus hits you, then they've got a problem.
Exactly.
Because their savior is gone, right? So if you build away from yourself, whether it be with processes, systems, people, whatever the case may be, you build it in a way that it can continue when you're gone, because that's the goal. It should be better like when you leave than when you got there, and it shouldn't stop or fall flat, the moment when you leave. And I think that's a brilliant principle that you highlighted.
I think another thing that was hard, and you spoke about this now, and we were building the airplane while it was in the air, and I didn't have systems that were in place, because I didn't actually know what systems were needed, and it really hindered us from building it faster, if that makes sense. Like I could feel how lack of good systems were keeping us from expanding, building something greater. And so I would even say, like, if you're thinking about starting something new, go and see what already was done, what systems are put in place, and start working on that, so that you don't have an airplane in the air and you're still like trying to figure out what systems you need to put in place. And it's okay if you're like, again, when you're pioneering, it is failing forward. But I think to just see how best you can set yourself up for success in seeing, like when we started the business, I had no idea with the finances, like how that's going to work, like how, and we struggled for months with it to get a system, to get something that worked. And again, I needed help. I pulled in one of my really smart friends who took over our finances. So I would say, that was something that really also hindered us, was knowing what systems would be needed.
So financially, in your space, that would be which material was bought, how many sales were made for which one of your independent contractors, how much money should you pay them now?
And having a a system that you could like, even just a program where everything is on the same thing.
Yeah.
And
Not
you know
Excel
what-
sheets and bank accounts.
you know what's going on with your
Yeah.
finances.
Yeah, and that's important,
Very, very, very important.
because I think that is the sole reason why a lot of businesses fail is bad financial management, not knowing what decisions they can actually make, which risks they can take. What other systems, processes or systems did you think would have been helpful?
I even just think on the like discipleship side, because we were trying to figure out how can we disciple them while we were discipling them. So that's something where just like a better system with discipleship, but then also with catching the people that we were reaching. Because at a point we were reaching a lot of people, but because of not having a lot of staff, a lot of people fell through the cracks that we were reaching. And that's something that we're currently looking at, is how can we even like recatch those people and build something in place that when we, and again, this is our ministry side, this is not a business side, but how can we make sure that there's nets in place that when we reach people, they don't just...
Yeah. So, well, interestingly enough, in the business context, you see the same thing. So with rapidly scaling businesses, if they don't have lead management tools, that's the type of tools we refer to, or CRM, customer relationship management tools, where you put the people's names, cell phone numbers, who's going to follow up with them. I mean, that's a practical thing that in a business context is used that you can actually make use of.
Yeah.
There's free tools like that. There's one I know that's called HubSpot, so you can actually put in the people's names, numbers, and you can integrate it with other systems that you might be using on the financial side or whatever, especially if they're independent contractors. So then you at least know who should be followed up with. When was the last time someone phoned them? Who should phone them? And it gives you notifications. So, I mean, in a business context, that's important. Otherwise, you lose sales. But in your context, it's following up with people who you want to help out of a different way of living.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's a lot of similarities, actually.
A lot. I live in...
Yeah. Sure, Caitlin, it's inspiring. Let me think of one final question. So one of the challenges that you've had, and I think this is the case in any mercy type organization, is raising up more people to help you, because the need is always greater. I mean, the Bible speaks about the harvest being plenty, but the harvesters being few. How have you guys been able to raise up people that can help with this? Because this is not a glamorous job, right? It's not something that's going to make you rich. There's none of that here. It's a purpose-driven thing, and it's not necessarily what people with or growing up think of when they think of all the different ambitions they have. You know, like you wanting to become a chemical engineer, and then your road plays out differently. So how do you guys raise leaders? Because, I mean, sorry, I just forgot to say this, because other businesses are going to have the same issue. People who want to do non-profit type work, that they need people to help service the needs. So that's the reason why I'm asking the question.
That's so good. Well, specifically with Mercy Ministries, I'm currently reading this book, which, if there's someone listening that wants to do Mercy Ministries, this is an incredible book of Timothy Keller speaking about the ministries of mercy. And something that they highlighted was that you can't guilt trip people into joining and taking action, even though it's a very clear commandment that we see in the Bible. And basically what he says, and I love it because that's how God kind of led it with what was done last year, is constantly put in front of the people the need that is there, but not in a way where you're guilt tripping them, but encouraging them, saying, hey, like, as a people of God, like, this is what we're called to, and it is our greatest joy to serve God in this way. And through that, to trust that God would speak to people in whatever form it is. We're seeing a lot in our community. God is speaking to a lot of people when it comes to vulnerable children. And so when it comes to Mercy Ministries, to put it in front of the people of, hey, we're commanded without guilt tripping them, but trusting that God would speak and he would send he would send the people that's needed. And then also to put in front of them what are the areas of need? Because a lot of people look at our ministry and they're like, well, I don't feel called to reach vulnerable women, so I don't think I fit in this ministry. But actually, I need people who are really good with finances, who are good with admin. I need people who are good with marketing, who are good with building connections with donors. So then it's not just working with vulnerable women, it's actually people who would be able to build systems. And so to put it in front of people of like, hey, these are the areas where we are in need of people to like labor in. And if you're running a ministry, to also just be humble and open with where you do have a need, because maybe there's someone who just deeply loves you and would want to serve you as a person. That's what I saw. The first people who helped me in this, like the one with the finances, and another girl who helped at the facility, they were people who came and just said, Caitlin, we love you and we want to serve you, and this is how much time I have available in my week. How can I serve you? What can I do for you? And so to be clear and open about your need, but then to also trust that God would send the people. And I think in a business context, have clear communication of what positions you have open. And then whoever God sends, build them, build the people. Like we are, I believe as believers, we're here to build people, which is making the disciples. So whoever God sends, to trust God that He would lead you as their leader to build within them whatever is needed to fulfill the position.
So on the one hand, it's clearly defining, verbalizing, and communicating the different needs. So categorizing those needs,
Yes.
I think that's helpful.
Yes.
Because, I mean, even before you mentioned that, I was sitting here and thinking, sure, I mean, I haven't spent much time speaking to prostitutes, gangsters, etc. I don't know how to sew, but I've got skills in customer relations, in product management, in inventory management, supply chain management, all of those things. So for the first time, it seems tangible that I can use my skill set to make a difference in your context. So I think that's a very, very helpful comment. And also calling people higher, that's what I hear you're saying, is taking those who are availing themselves and not, how can I say this, being judgmental on the quality of person in your view. Because sometimes the people who are willing don't look like the best people, right?
Yeah.
A-rated, whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are, and that's amazing and whatever. But it's helping those people realize what's in them. And I mean, if thinking of starting a movement to impact the world, in your case, through reaching vulnerable women and children and the gangsters, etc. Jesus was a good example because he took people who no one else would have chosen, unschooled, unlearned people, fishermen, basically. And he used them, empowered them, called them higher. And at the end of the day, they were successful in what they were called to do. Some of them were good mathematicians. I mean, Matthew was a tax collector, so I mean, I'm sure he was good with math. So there's place for that.
Amen. We need them. Send them, Lord.
But sure, Caitlin, this has been very inspiring. Also, I think, thank you just for your openness, sharing your story and what you guys are busy with. I'm looking forward to the impact that you guys are going to be making and many more testimonies of how your obedience and stepping out into the purpose-driven call that you have on your life is going to bring people out of slavery and bondage into freedom, where they can be independent, looking after their own families, and then the fruit of that. I think this is something we sometimes miss, is we don't think multi-generational. If you think of one woman being brought out of that, coming into a loving relationship, having children, them growing up in a loving home, and how that impact changes over generations. Don't get distraught or demotivated with the few that you might be reaching at the moment, but we're trusting that it can be many over many years and many generations. So well done, and I keep doing what you guys are doing.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. This was so much fun.
This is awesome. Thank you, Caitlin.
I just want to say thanks to everyone for listening. And I just want to encourage everyone just to subscribe, go to our social media pages, Instagram, LinkedIn. And if you guys are keen on booking a call with us, to do a session with us and just have good chats, book a call on our Linktree link, and see you guys in the next one. Thanks.